Hey, it's Matt with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday. It's January 19th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And taking a look at the daily chart here, you can see that mostly down day. We recovered off the low, and this somewhat matches the intraday chart because we had the early sell-off, and then we just went sideways, but we never really recovered very much. We just mostly went sideways the rest of the day. It'll be interesting to see. You notice we bounced off the previous resistance. It acted as support twice now. So it'll be interesting to see if we go higher or if we continue pushing lower here. Really, we're just kind of bouncing around between different support and resistance areas here on the daily chart. And of course, last couple of days have been relatively bearish. So we'll see how we continue here. It's hard to say what's going to happen here. If this support holds, we may push higher again. So if it doesn't, we'll probably continue to push lower. That's really what the market does. It tests support and resistance, and if it can't push through, it eventually gives up, goes the other direction, starts testing the other direction until it can't go any further in that direction, then it flip-flops again and goes in the other direction. That's what happens on range days. We just get caught between support and resistance, and prices just keep chopping around, going back and forth. So let's flip over to that other chart and take a look. Okay, here's our 2,000 tick chart. You can see we were in a range today. Here's the overnight highs up here, overnight lows down here. We breached this momentarily down here at the lows before we rallied relatively strongly, and then we sold back off down in the lower half of the range again. We had this first leg down, so you had to be concerned that we might get a measured leg down, and you see when we didn't get that, normally that means you'll get a pretty good move in the other direction, and you can see we had a nice two-tiered rally all the way back up before we had a break, and we've never really retested this high. It's a range day. The day's pretty much over anyway. We'll see if in the overnight if this pattern continues to play out. But generally, by the time you get in the next day, we're done with this day. We're not looking at these patterns anymore, and we'll look for new patterns. So that's the better way to play it. The early morning this morning was really good. There was a nice trend up here, a couple of several easy second entry longs. Then it got kind of, it's a little sparse after that because we're just chopping around. But let's zoom in here. We'll go through the trades. We'll wrap this day up. This will wrap up our week. No chart lessons on Friday. So 7 o'clock came right down in here somewhere, and we're just chopping along. And that's right into this news at 7:30. This is not red, but, you know, I doubt you could catch this news right here. If you did, you might go short on that. It broke higher and failed and turned down. I mean, we're just in a range there. I don't know if you'd have time to make anything out of that. If you could, definitely, you know, take that trade. But it's right at that news hour. And even though I wouldn't be afraid to take news on this green stuff, you know, I just don't know if you'd had time to catch that. But anyway, we bounce off the lows. You get a failure here. I wouldn't take the failure because it's a little congested. But when it tries to go lower again, and pretty much that's fourth bounce off that trend line with a nice signal bar, I like going long there. You might let it break higher and try to drop a limit order and get a little better entry because there's some resistance up here. But I'll take that trade anyway. And then we come back to the trend line again. You get a first entry, turns down, turns up. So when it breaks above that two-bar matching high right there, that's a second entry long. Then you get a failed second entry short, so I like that one as well. And so right out of the gate, you got three nice ones, and you probably catch a runner on this last one. Might have caught a runner on this one too, and that might be all you need for the day. We come back up here, you get a triple test here on the first break of this green channel. There's a second entry here. You might have taken that trade, but that looks a little congested. I'd probably wait and see what happens, and you get this higher low and a triple test here on this bar. I like going long there, and you can see that's the smarter traders were probably waiting on that, and off it goes. And so you get your break, move to a new high, and then you're turning down. That's tempting, but I'd wait. and you get a little break higher here and a turn down, but it's moved a little far to call that a lower high. It's not a reversal, so I don't think you want to take that trade. And then we get the break, move to a new low, and then we're just kind of chopping along here. I don't see anything in this whole range that I really like except here. And I marked this one green because you got a 1, 2, 3 triple test. And it's a relatively bearish bar. It looks like a trading range. There's plenty of room back to the midline, ton of room to the low side, which we may run all the way back to the low side again. And of course we do, and it breaks out the bottom. I didn't mark this trade. Generally, you're better off to wait on the high or low, and you never get that until you're in this congestion here. Sometimes these pay off really well if you want to be risky. There was a triple test here, but that's just too congested, not a very good signal bar. It ends up working out, but I wouldn't risk it. We turn down here, and there is a failure here, but again, it looks really congested. You're not really looking for a failure here. This is the middle of a range. You can get chopped all to pieces. So again, I don't see anything. We fell out the bottom once again, get back in, and I marked this one green. I'm not crazy about it, but there's definitely a 1, 2, 3 triple test, and it does break higher and turn down. It closes very bearish. You would expect prices to try to make a new low. So you may take that trade. I think it's a little risky because it could bounce on you and get back in the range. We end up chopping on down here to the lower end anyway. And notice we had the failed breakout again, and that's a perfect measured move. So again, that's one, if you want to be aggressive, maybe you take that trade because sometimes those pay off. But there is a first entry, second entry that fails. But again, that's not a reversal. It's on the wrong side. Yeah, you could call it a failed second entry short, but we're not looking for a failure here. We're looking for a reversal, and that's not a reversal pattern. It would need to be above that EMA. But a few seconds later, we get a higher low and a second entry, and you could also call that a triple test and a nice signal bar. So I like that one. We came back and tested that support twice. Actually, we tested it 1, 2, 3 times. Triple test, and look at it go. We turn around. Again, you get this setup here, but it's on the wrong side. I don't see anything down through here I like. You got to be real careful in here to keep from getting chopped up. And once again, you fell out the bottom. And there's that little low bar again. I mean, there's what, 3 ticks in that thing, 4 ticks. So again, I didn't mark it, but that's one of those if you want to be aggressive. I mean, you're risking 5 or 6 ticks to maybe catch the bottom here. And you probably would have got a runner on that. And next thing you know, you get the reversal here. I marked this one, and that's how a reversal, there's clearly 2 legs up with a failed second entry, but it's right into that support resistance line, so that makes me a little wary of it. You see it took off and worked because it's like a trap. And all these short people that got short have to exit. They're short covering. So maybe you take that trade. We bounce here. I don't like anything there. And then we get the break. And then we just start actually going sideways. And once again, you get that little failed break lower. But this time, it's off a possible trend line, but it's still a failed break lower. It is a second entry. We're not looking for second entries in sideways stuff, but still pay attention to them if they're there. And look at it go. Boom. We work back, break outside, new low. We never really get a good trigger here. We're not back to the trend line. We didn't get to the high. You're kind of in no man's land there, so I just skip that. Here you might have a triple test. It's not quite low enough, really, in my opinion, to call that a triple test. If you draw your support where you'd probably want it, which is right across here, you can see we come up short. There is a higher low here above the EMA, but it's right into resistance now. So again, I don't really like it. We run up to the upper side, turn down. I don't see any shorts here I really like. Then we're just kind of chopping along. That one's really tempting, but we're in an uptrend here. It's not a real strong uptrend, but you can clearly see the EMA is up, and we're running back and forth. There's a clear channel here. We're not back to the trend line, and that's why I'm wary of that, and I'm wary of going long right here, and that's why I'm wary of the short. Yeah, we may come down here, but we may not. We're in an uptrend. So I think you would at least want a second entry here or something, and you get one, but there's no setup that we could trade, and then you get that little drop below. And this bar ends up breaking lower first and turning up. I wouldn't trade that on the engulfing bar, but if it breaks above that bar, go with it. And you can see it turns out to be another great trade. No other entries on the way up, and then we're chopping sideways again. I marked this one. Notice you got a 1, 2, 3 triple test. Nice signal bar. It's a clear range. Plenty of room to the top. Maybe you take that. And then you get a triple test here. That's also a second entry short. Very bearish bar. Plenty of room back to the low side. I went back and forth whether I should mark that green or red, but I like that trade. If I'm trading then, I take that trade. And so I went ahead and marked it red. And we end up being in a downtrend. But I don't see anything else here really on the way down till into to the 2:30 hour that I would really trade. We're just kind of chopping slightly down, but very sideways stuff. There's not really a good setup here at all. There's a second entry here when this comes. It actually triggers on this bar. It breaks lower first and then turns up. So I mean that just looks too congested there. I mean we're in this uptrend. We're back in this range, so we're not back to the high. So there's really no reason to go short there. It looks really tempting on this one, but again, it just looked like congested and sideways, right in the middle of the range. Would have worked, but don't risk it. And of course, that takes us into 2:30. So this was your best opportunity. There were several second entries in there. Great trend up. This set up pretty nicely. And a lot of green ones in here today, but you get that on these. And there's probably others you could argue. There always are others you could argue to at least be green. And, people will send me emails or posts asking about trades. And what about this trade? Well, if I didn't mark it, I didn't like it. Doesn't mean there weren't reasons that you might have found that you wanted to take it, but it doesn't mean that it's a great trade either, even if it works. So people ask me about usually it's one somebody took and it failed and they want to know why it failed or whatever. And it's a lot of times it's like answering a negative. You can't answer a negative. It wasn't a good setup. If it failed, it wasn't a good setup. And I know a lot of times people want more details on what's wrong with it. It looks like this other trade, but we're not pattern traders. I try to explain that to people. We are not pattern traders. Just because it looks the same does not mean that it's the same setup. I see that all the time. If you just take the 4 or 5 bars there that you're looking at, yeah, it looks just like the 4 or 5 bars over here that work perfectly that I marked. But if you look at the context, it's nothing the same. It's not the same setup. It's not the same. The chart's not telling us the same thing, and they're nothing alike. So you have to learn to see through that. And if you don't see it, just understand that study the trade and learn not to make that same mistake again. That's the whole idea behind doing this. So you can compare your trades to mine and improve your choice and just learn what to look for and that type of thing. So, but yeah, just because it looks the same does not mean it's the same. We're not pattern traders. You got to look at the chart. What is the chart telling you? So anyway, hope you've had a good trading week. I'm going to wrap it up. We're done for this week. We'll be back again Monday. But I'm done for today, and I'm done for this week. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.